Think we're recording here. What is going on, Sales Dev Squad? Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sales Dev Squad podcast. Got a super awesome guest for you today. We'll be talking with James McGuinness, who is doing a lot of exciting things in the sales community. Previous titles such as Head of Sales Development, Guest Trainer, Director of Inside Sales, working for some of really hot companies in the Chicago area. He's also an author of a novel as well called Stars Will Guide You Home. Super excited to have him on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today, James.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, James. Well, I'm super happy to have you here. I know we'll be covering a lot of cool topics today, but James, I just kind of wanted to get you to share a bit more about just your experience in tech sales, specifically, being an SDR or working closely with SDRs. I know we chatted, last week, and we talked briefly about, how SDRs, at times are, underrated, sometimes undervalued, and the job is extremely difficult. And, just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, the state of sales development as we are here in, mid-June, and just your experience with just sales development.
Yeah, right. Well, I suppose I should give you a little bit of background. I think like most people, I didn't want to be a salesperson. I didn't even know, and you look back 15 years ago, salespeople were like the cheesy car salesman. And now we've got a much more of a good reputation. But I fell into sales, and I find numerous people find themselves falling into sales development. You don't go to college to be a sales development rep. And what's interesting is I think it's the gateway to the whole company. And so you look at sales development and you think, okay, well, first of all, they're the meeting setters, right? And then you think to yourself, well, actually, these are the future of the company, because if we want to promote internally, these are the people that can do it, maybe in even different roles. And so I start looking at sales development as the most important role, because they're the future of the company to some extent. And then if you think about the world has drastically changed in selling right now. And I listen to other podcasts, I follow things, but 15 years ago when I was selling was very different to what you are now. Like most of the time, the buyers are actually taking the control of the situation and the conversations. And so sales development people really have to be on top of their game. They really have to pivot. They really have to work hard to get those meetings. And then on the other side of it, more and more, the AEs are expecting, or the business people are expecting better quality, right? So, you're in a tough job, and it's your first job or second job out of college. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you did a course on sales development at college. So you're learning a bunch of new things. You're learning selling. You've got the pressure of how to get more with the difficulty of the buyers. And at the same time, you're in a position where you're working out what your career path is. And as a manager, you have to determine, you have to juggle all of that for the SDR. So does that answer your question? Does that kind of clarify things?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to unpack it further because I know we chatted last week as well. Like from your experience, certain characteristics or, traits that make really good performing SDRs. I think you kind of mentioned last week, any individual that has some sort of prior sports background, I believe is sort of what you mentioned. Was hoping you can kind of dive deeper into, I guess, that sort of idea.
I personally, when I hire people, I look for a couple of traits. The one is on their background is they have to be in. I love people that have had team or competitive experience. So sports is the natural side of things, but and I don't know whether this is classified as a sport or not, but there was a guy that we hired a year or so ago that was actually captain of his Quidditch team at college. And, that I don't know whether Quidditch is even an official sport because it's a Harry Potter game, but to me, he was playing a sporting game. He was training and he was being coached. And I like people that have the ability to have had coaching, if I played football, real football, English football. I played football, and you get coaching. You get coaches telling you to do drills, telling you to get better, telling you to practice these things. And so to me, being able to be coached is a great skill. And that's why I like people that are competitive, people that have played in some kind of sport. The other ones I look for are, they've got to be passionate about the interview, the company. Like, so to me, I don't want to hire someone if they're not passionate either about what they're selling or the company they're working for, because it's just not going to end up as a good fit. And I'll give you a prime example. Again, I hired a guy, and super great sales guy, but just was not interested in financial services in any shape or form. And I knew that, like, he was struggling right from the start to get passionate about what we were selling. So there's got to be some form of passion. And the third, I think I mentioned this to you last week, I kind of like people that have chips on their shoulder. I kind of like people that want to prove people wrong, or want to prove themselves that they can do things. That has in the past done me well. That has served me well. And from my own experience, every time something's gone wrong, or every time I've got a chip on my shoulder, I tend to perform much better. So they're the traits I look for SDRs.
That's awesome, James. Really appreciate that. Obviously, I know that you're working on a couple projects right now. Just kind of wanted to get your thoughts. Like, obviously, kind of a weird job market right now in COVID-19. Companies have sort of been tasked to, work remote, and thus shifting probably the entire sales workforce into more of like an online sort of workforce. So I was curious, like, in a post-COVID world, where do you kind of see this SDR role? Do you feel like it's shifting more towards like like a freelance, or sort of like a, strictly remote basis? I guess, how do you foresee, post COVID-19 world sort of shifting the way, a person can have a sales job, or just the
Yeah.
way it works?
Yeah. Good question. So my new project, which I'm launching in a couple of weeks, is actually around the freelance space. So I'm launching a freelance sales platform, which I'll share more details on LinkedIn, and you guys can see it at a later date. But the idea being, the 40 million people in America are now freelance, and people don't necessarily want to hire full-time salespeople. They want to hire freelancers. And on the flip side, I've seen over and over again where salespeople get burnt out. All right, SDRs, the average tenure, I was talking to someone the other day, and the average tenure of an SDR is 15 months now. So that's something that burnout is pretty quick. That you either want to be an AE, you want to move on to an account manager, or a different role, or a different company. And so to me, being a freelancer and maybe working 2-3 projects keeps you a little bit more engaged as well. So I definitely think that's the future. I post-COVID working from home, that's an interesting one. I think, and I'm only going by the last few months, I actually think it's not being working remotely has not benefited SDR teams. Now, that doesn't mean all sales, but SDRs to me are a much more, you're doing the calls, you're doing the meetings, and it's I love it when you're in the office and there's that high five with each other. Or I saw it where, like, one guy was struggling, and so one of my team, the girl would just go sit next to him, like, okay, let's have a friendly bet, let's go for it for the next hour. And so I don't actually think SDR will long-term be remote. I might be wrong, but I think that there has to be that collaboration, that kind of camaraderie on an SDR team to win. What I do think, I've done sales training for a few years now, and I've trained reps, and I want to apologize to the reps I trained, because for years I focused on the numbers game, right? You got to do 100 touches a day on my team, typically over 60 calls. And if you got to do 8 touches to the company, you're going to get that one meeting. And I think that the SDR world is changing drastically, from a numbers game to a strategic play. And I think that will be the biggest shift in the next couple of years with SDRs. Is I think you can get one meeting a day by being more strategic than you can doing one meeting a day, doing 100 calls. So that will be the biggest shift, I think, post COVID.
Mhm. So I guess like a sales manager out there that has been taught that, sales is a numbers game, and they have already, sort
Yeah.
of come up with a formula in their mind for their team as far as, what the daily metrics would result in X meetings. And, for whatever reason, that approach isn't working, and they're sort of coming to the conclusion that exactly sort of what you mentioned. How does an SDR manager sort of shift their mindset from going to, like you mentioned, more of like a quantity to more of like a quality game, or what needs to be done there on that front?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? And I always teach about evolution, right? And I teach about evolution in sales. Human beings have been around for 5,000 years. So by default, selling in some capacity has been around for 4,999 years. Like, in the olden days, you would say, okay, I need some wool to keep myself warm. Well, I don't have money, but I'll give you a bushel of apples, right? I mean, that's been going on for years, negotiation. And this evolution of sales has meant that we've had to adapt numerous times. Like, I assume you've seen Wolf of Wall Street, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. And people will say, oh, greatest sales movie of all time. Um, it's a great movie, but that was around 30 years ago, where the numbers game did work because no one had a cell phone, no one had caller ID, and people were actually excited to get a phone call. You know, when I started out, and again, I look younger than I am, but when I started out in 2004, LinkedIn didn't even exist. And I remember when someone taught me how to do a mail merge, and I was like, man, this is game changing. I've just sent 100 emails in a minute. And now the response rate, last I heard, was less than 1% for, sending a generic email. And again, I'll ask you, like, how many times do you get a generic email in a day? How many times do you open it?
Oh, a ton of messages on LinkedIn as well.
Right. And you never open it. So, we've got to evolve. And to your point on, like, whether good managers are constantly looking at, well, how do you evolve? How do you do it better than you've done before? Bad managers always stick to doing it. I've always done it this way, which in my opinion is the most dangerous words in any business. But the question of how do you evolve and what do you do? I don't know all the answers yet. I'm a manager that learns from my sales team. Like, one of my reps started sending out video, and got a ton of responses, and I was like, wow, that's great. Like, let's do that for the whole team. Another one changed their approach on who they're targeting to only target people that from the college they went to, so they can start it by saying, like, hey, like, we're alumni, let's connect. That was also great. So I think the managers need to actually listen to the SDRs. They need SDRs that are willing to take some chances, willing to try things. And I mentioned this to you as well. Like, it's okay to fail. Like, I want you to fail. So take some chances as an SDR. Come back to me as your manager and tell me what you did. And if it works, then great, I'll roll it out to the team. But if it didn't work, don't continue doing it. Don't be an idiot.
Mhm.
But that's how I think we're going to evolve, is really listening to actually what the team see.
How do you feel SDR managers can create an atmosphere where their team feels comfortable providing ideas, and just like you mentioned, where a rep can come up to you and be like, "Hey, James, this is what I'm trying. I got a couple responses. Like, what do you think?" How can SDR managers create sort of that environment to where that feedback loop is super super easy, and you're able to cross collaborate much easier?
Yeah, I might get myself in trouble here, but I always say what I think. Like, I would almost challenge, like, why wouldn't you have that scenario, right? If you're an SDR manager and you're doing the calls, you're doing the activity, you're booking the meetings the same as your team, okay. But most of the time, like, at least a quarter of my time was taken up recruiting. At least a quarter of my time was doing training or, strategy. So I'm not rolling up my sleeves doing it, and I need the feedback from my team. And so to me, that's a given. And I would say that how do you create that culture? You create it from day one, right? When I built a sales team out, the last time I built a sales team out, right from day one, it was, okay, I'm going to have a one-on-one with you every week, and we're going to talk about these things. But if you don't want the one-on-one because you're busy, then we'll cancel it. And if you want to talk to me about your career and not SDR life, or you want to talk to me about this idea, let's do it. And let's also, like, I've got free time, I've got a calendar. If you really want to pitch an idea to me, put some time in my calendar. My ask is, respect, in the same way you respect a client's time, respect your manager's time. And I love SDRs, and I love my team. Like, when an SDR comes up to me when I'm like zoned in trying to do something, and they're like, "Hey, have you got 5 minutes?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then they pitch me something, and you can tell they haven't thought it through, and they haven't like, my feedback to them is like, "You're wasting my time here. Like, come back to me and book 30 minutes when you've actually got a business idea that's relevant."
Definitely, definitely. I love this, James. I wanted to take a couple steps back here and
Yeah.
cover a bit more about your book. That's awesome that you're an author. Your book's out there. I
Yeah.
guess, what was the inspiration for you, starting and writing Stars Will Guide You Home?
Yeah. So, I was always like, I was a geek. I always liked writing and telling stories, which is probably why I landed in sales. And I remember as a teenager, I would create these like make-believe stories in my bedroom and like almost like act them out. But I was so embarrassed to tell anyone. To me, it was like, man, you seem like a weirdo. Like, why aren't you playing football and tennis all the time? Why are you like creating these stories? So I never told anyone about it. Anyway, my inspiration came because all four of my grandparents were in the Second World War in England. And before my grandparent, I've got one grandma alive, but the other three, before they died, I started to talk to them about their experiences. And when I moved to America, I was really lonely, so I missed my nan. So I would talk to her on the phone every week, and she started to get dementia, so she couldn't remember what she'd done like an hour ago, but she could remember her stories of the war. And so I just started writing down her stories of the war, and then like her husband, my granddad's stories of the war. And then I asked my dad the same about his parents, and I just started writing and creating this book, and that was Stars Will Guide You Home. And it took me, I think, 7 years to finish it. And I just launched it last year. And I'm not giving up my day job right now, but people in Hollywood, right? So if they want to buy the rights, feel free. But it was cool. It was a great experience. And now I'm writing my second book. And to me, I firmly believe that everyone should have hobbies. Everyone should have interests. Like, what those are is up to you, but you shouldn't be ashamed of your passions or your hobbies, and you should actually embrace them. And if you're going to do it full out.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to have to take a look at it and see if we can turn it into a feature film in 2021.
Yeah, right. Oh, if you give me your address, I'll send you a signed copy. We'll start with that, right? You might hate the book.
Well, I mean, you're an author, you're a storyteller, James. I guess, how has this ability to share a story, whether it's, fiction or nonfiction, changed the way that you look at sales, I guess?
Yeah, I actually was I was listening to a guy this morning, and it was really interesting because he had the same thoughts as me. Like, how many times, like, do you get, even as an SDR, do you feel like when you're on the call, or even as an AE, when you're on the call and you're presenting statistics, do you think that people are like actually like fully engaged? Like, oh wow, like, oh my God, that statistic's unbelievable. It happens, but it's not all the time. Whereas stories relate to people. Like, everyone has stories. Everyone has their own experiences. Like, and even if you're just starting out as an SDR, I guarantee you that the sales manager, the AEs have experiences, have stories, even if it's not with that company you worked with. And being human, people, like, my number one rule, and reps will laugh at me about this. In fact, any of my reps listen to this, they'll be like rolling their eyes. But my number one rule in life is people buy from people. Like people will buy from you and your personality. And so if you can relate with stories and analogies and, relate to them, I think people are much more likely to buy. And I mean, I've failed way too much in my life, but stories have served me well as well. Like I've hit targets because of jokes and stories and analogies I've used.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely excited to take a look at that further. I always like to, I guess, wrap up the podcast, James, with a question that, is really close to home, I guess. For any SDR out there that's sort of, struggling or just, just trying to find what they're going to do next, or, just whatever the case may be. What advice do you have for them as far as just setting them up for success and their next opportunity?
Yeah, I think you touched on the SDR managers out there. I think one of the most important roles of the SDR manager is to have career conversations with your team. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you have to have tough conversations. And so I'll go back to the SDR and give the advice in a minute, but to the manager, these people are starting out their careers. They don't necessarily know what the next move is for them, or where I see more often, they think they want to be an AE because that's the natural career path, but their skills, based on my years of experience, are actually suited as an account manager or another role. And so as an SDR manager, you should be having conversations every single month with your team about their career, where they want to be and where you think they might be. You might be wrong, but your job is to guide them. And so as I reflect back on my career, that's where I think the career path, the career things go with the SDRs. And I think for any SDR that's starting out their career right now, have a conversation with someone about your career. You don't know all the answers. If your manager is not willing to have that conversation, find a mentor. I mean, hell, anyone that listens to this, come email me and I'll have a conversation with you, and I'll be as frank as I can with you on your career. But have that conversation about, here's where I am, here's what I think I want to do, and here's why, and see what other people think and get that feedback. And then the other piece I would say to someone as well is the former VP of sales at LinkedIn was a guy called Mike Gampson, an unbelievable leader, probably the best leader I've ever worked with. And he always had 3 rules. His rules were, when you're looking at career path, first of all, nail your current job. You can't have a fair conversation about being promoted or changing jobs if you're not giving 100% or you're not at your quota. Now, if you're giving 100% and you're really struggling as an SDR, then at least you're giving 100%, and we can talk about career. But if you're not doing your current role as best you can, don't have the conversation about what's next. The second one is, try and master what the next role is before you go for it. So if your next role is an account executive, try and master that role. Listen in with the AEs, actually do a mock call with the current AEs and get feedback from them. Actually be able to demonstrate, because then when the opportunity comes up, you're going to be in a good position to position yourself. But not only that, you're also got the backing of the AEs already. Yeah, we want him on our team. We want her on our team. And then the third is the what else element, right? And again, if I had two SDRs and I was hiring for an AE, the first thing I would look at is where's their dedication right now? The second, and where are their performances right now? Then I would look at, could they do the AE role? And the third thing is I look at what else. If they're tied on the first 2, but one of them is going out their way to help new hires come on the team, is going out of their way to be the culture committee and doing things for the company, and the other one is not doing any of that, who do you think I'm going to hire? Mm-hmm. It's going to be the one that does everything else. So that would be my advice to SDRs: is talk to someone about your career and get guidance on things. But then the 3 rules, be 100% in on what you're doing, be ready to step up, and the what else do you bring? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, James. I loved it, man. You're getting me pumped up already. I know you're working on some exciting projects, especially, you know, some potential exciting projects for anyone out there sort of looking for some flexible and work in that regard. I guess for anyone out there listening, James, where can they best reach you?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn for now. I'm launching my business in 2 weeks, so I don't know when you're going to publish this or whatever the term is. Launch this. So for now, connect with me on LinkedIn. And again, going back to your point on earlier, if you're going to connect with me on LinkedIn, I've got 99 connection requests right now on LinkedIn, and I will ignore anyone that doesn't put a personalized note in. So if you're listening out there and you want to connect with me and you want a career advice, put the personal note in, connect with me, and I guarantee you I'll accept your connection request and put time on your calendar.
That's a great tip. Thank you so much, James. It's been a pleasure having you on here. I'm super excited to hear more about what you're working on, and hope to have you on the podcast sometime in the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are doing a great thing. Like I said right at the beginning, I think SDRs, you know, they need all the help you can get. You're in a tough gig, so happy to come on again. Happy to help your community out. You know, and you do a great job, man.
Thank you so much, James. Excited to hear more, but thank you, Sales Dev Squad, for tuning into another episode, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.